The Singapore rain hammered against the penthouse windows like bullets trying to break through glass, each drop a percussion in the symphony of Desmarie's unraveling. She stood barefoot on cold marble, 3 months and 14 days after burning Chicago to the ground, with a man who'd promised her forever, staring at a phone that wasn't supposed to exist. Jun's burner phone, hidden inside a false bottom of his leather briefcase. The briefcase he'd told her contained nothing but investment portfolios and travel documents for their new life. The screen glowed in the 3 a.m. darkness, illuminating her warm brown skin, her natural curls wild and loose around her shoulders, the black diamond ring on her finger suddenly feeling less like a promise and more like a noose. The last message was time-stamped 2 hours ago, while she'd been sleeping in their bed, while Jun had been supposedly working in his office down the hall, while she'd been stupid enough to believe that a man who'd manipulated everyone in his life had somehow decided to stop with her. It's done. She doesn't suspect anything. Wire transfer confirmed. You were right about her. She's so desperate to believe in happy endings, she can't see the cage you're building. The reply came from a number saved only as V. Good. Keep her comfortable. 3 more months and the Singapore accounts will be untouchable. Then we move to phase 2. Desmarie's hand started shaking so violently she nearly dropped the phone. 3 months. The exact amount of time they'd been playing house in this gorgeous prison. The exact amount of time Jun had been touching her like she was precious, so looking at her like she mattered, whispering promises against her skin in the dark. The exact amount of time she'd been falling in love with her own destruction. Behind her, she heard the office door open, footsteps on marble. Jun's voice, rough with exhaustion or perhaps just well-practiced concern. Desmarie, what are you doing up? She turned slowly, the burner phone held loosely in her hand, and watched his face do something she'd never seen before. Jun went absolutely still. His long dark hair was loose around his shoulders, the thorned vine tattoo on his neck visible above his black t-shirt, his dark eyes locked on the phone in her hand, with an intensity that made her skin crawl. For 5 seconds, neither of them moved. Then Jun smiled. Not the gentle smile he'd been giving her for 3 months, and not the vulnerable expression he wore when he thought she was sleeping. This was the smile of the man who'd orchestrated his brother's arrest, who'd burned his empire as a cover story, who'd made her believe she was his equal when she was really just another piece on his board. I can explain, he said quietly. Can you? Desmarie's voice was steady, despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. Because I'd love to hear the explanation for she's so desperate to believe in happy endings she can't see the cage you're building. Jun took a step closer. She took a step back. That text is 3 weeks old, he said. From before what? Before you decided you actually loved me? Before you figured out a better lie? Her laugh was sharp enough to draw blood. I read the timestamps, Jun, and the last message was sent 2 hours ago. While I was sleeping. While you were supposedly working. So tell me, what exactly were you working on? The rain intensified, creating a wall of sound that made the penthouse feel smaller, the air thicker. Jun's expression shifted then, and she saw the exact moment he made a choice. The moment he decided which version of himself to show her. You want the truth? His voice dropped to that dangerous register she remembered from Chicago, from the office where this all started. Fine, sit down, Desmarie, because the truth is going to hurt a lot more than whatever you think you've discovered. So here's what I need to know right now. When you found out someone you trusted was playing you, did you stay to hear them out? Or did you run? Because Desmarie's about to make a choice that changes everything. And I'm curious what you would do in her position. Drop a comment, hit subscribe if you're ready for this to get darker, and tell me what city you're watching from because we're about to take this story somewhere it's never been before. Desmarie didn't sit. She stood there in the middle of the penthouse, barefoot on cold marble, wearing silk pajamas that Jun had bought her, in an apartment Jun had secured, in a city Jun had chosen, holding a phone that proved every single thing about the last 3 months had been a performance. The rain continued its assault on the windows, creating a cage of sound around them. John moved to the bar cart, poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a crystal glass, and took a slow sip before speaking. His long, dark hair caught the ambient light from the city below, and the thorned vine tattoo on his neck seeming to pulse with each controlled breath. "The person texting me is named Vera," he said, his voice carrying that surgical calm that made her want to scream. "She's a financial architect based in Zurich, and yes, before you ask, I've been working with her for the past 6 months." 6 months. Desmarie's voice was hollow. "That's 3 months before Chicago burned." "Correct." June set down his glass with precision. "I hired her the day after I decided to dismantle the Shin Syndicate, because unlike what you apparently think, I don't make billion-dollar decisions without having multiple exit strategies in place." "And which exit strategy am I?" The words came out sharper than she intended. "Is it the one where you keep me comfortable and compliant while you build whatever cage she's referring to?" Jun's jaw tightened fractionally. "You're reading it wrong." "Then help me read it right." Desmarie held up the phone, her warm brown skin stark against the black device, her natural curls creating wild shadows on the wall behind her. "Because she doesn't suspect anything sounds pretty clear to me. So does keep her comfortable. So does the part about me being desperate for happy endings." "That message isn't about you." Jun's voice dropped even lower. "It's about Minho's wife." The statement hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Desmarie's mind raced, shuffling through fragments of information. Minho had been married for 2 years. His wife, Yuna, had always been quiet, professional, perfectly polished. Had the kind of woman who smiled at syndicate functions and never asked questions about where the money came from. "Minho's wife," she repeated slowly, "is currently in federal custody as a material witness," Jun continued, moving closer with that predatory grace she'd learned to recognize. "And she has information that could destroy what's left of my family's legitimate businesses. The ones my mother built. The ones that have nothing to do with the syndicate." He was close enough now that Desmarie could smell his cologne mixing with rain scent from the open balcony door she hadn't noticed until now. "Vera has been helping me negotiate Yuna's testimony," Jun said, "making sure she understands that cooperation means protection for her and Minho's daughter. I'm making sure she doesn't suspect that I'm the one orchestrating her deal with the DA. Making sure she stays comfortable enough in witness protection that she doesn't decide to burn everything down out of spite." Desmarie stared at him, searching his face for the lie. "Why wouldn't you just tell me that?" "Because this phone also contains communications about things you don't need to know." Jun's hand came up slowly, cupping her face with a gentleness that felt like a contradiction. "Arrangements I've made to keep you safe that require you to have plausible deniability. Bank accounts that are technically illegal. People I've paid to make other people disappear. The kind of information that makes you an accessory instead of a victim if the wrong person ever asks the wrong questions." His thumb traced the line of her cheekbone, and she hated how her body responded to the touch, despite the fury still burning in her chest. "I've been protecting you," he whispered, "not manipulating you." "How am I supposed to know the difference?" Her voice cracked on the last word. "How am I supposed to trust anything you say when you've already proven you're willing to lie to everyone, including your own brother, to get what you want?" Jun's expression shifted then, something raw and painful flickering across his face. "You're not. That's the point. That's why I gave you the ring before you were ready to accept it. That's why I brought you here instead of somewhere easier to hide. That's why I've spent 3 months showing you who I am instead of telling you." "And who are you, Jun?" Desmarie demanded. "Because right now, is standing here at 3 a.m. holding evidence that you're still keeping secrets. I have no idea." The rain hammered harder, and lightning split the sky beyond the windows, illuminating them both in stark white light for one frozen second. Jun pulled out his own phone, unlocked it with his thumbprint, and handed it to her. "Read everything. Every message, every email, every encrypted file. If you still think I'm building you a cage after that, I'll arrange a flight anywhere you want to go. Tonight. No questions. No tracking. Just gone. Desmarais took the phone with shaking hands, her elegant fingers wrapping around the device that could either prove his innocence or confirm her worst fears. Desmarais sat on the leather couch, June's phone glowing in her hands, while he stood by the windows with his back to her, giving her space to breathe and privacy to read things he'd clearly never intended to share. The files were organized with the same meticulous precision she remembered from Chicago. Folders labeled with dates and code names, encrypted messages that required biometric authentication to open, financial records that painted a picture of a man systematically dismantling everything he'd ever built. She started with the folder labeled Exit Strategy Alpha, dated 6 months before Chicago burned. The first document was a psychological profile of her. Desmarais felt ice slide down her spine as she read clinical assessments of her behavioral patterns, her risk tolerance, her emotional vulnerabilities, her likelihood of accepting various scenarios. It was detailed, thorough, and absolutely invasive. You had me psychologically evaluated. Her voice cut through the sound of rain. June didn't turn around. I needed to know if you could handle what I was planning, if the truth would destroy you or make you stronger. And what did your expensive analysts conclude? That you were the most dangerous person in my organization. Now he did turn, his dark eyes finding hers across the room. Not because you were violent or unstable, because you were adaptable, intelligent enough to see patterns I tried to hide, strong enough to survive losing everything, and ruthless enough to rebuild from ashes if you decided that's what you wanted. Desmarais' hands tightened on the phone. So you decided to test that theory by burning my entire life to the ground. I decided to give you the choice I never had, June corrected quietly. I was born into the syndicate, raised to take over an empire I never wanted. Every decision I made for 30 years was about maintaining power I didn't ask for and protecting people who saw me as a weapon instead of a person. He moved closer, and the ambient light from the city caught the sharp angles of his face, the thorned vine tattoo seeming to pulse with emotion he was trying to contain. You had a choice, Desmarais. You always had a choice. Stay in Chicago and build a normal life, take the money and disappear, or come with me and build something neither of us could create alone. That's not a choice when you manipulated every variable, she shot back. Isn't it? June's voice was soft but edged with something sharp. You think I controlled Julian Vance being a federal plant? I discovered him and warned you. Oh, you think I controlled Minho's betrayal. I protected you from it. You think I controlled the feds raiding the building? I used it to clear your name. He sat down next to her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin, close enough to see the exhaustion written in every line of his face. The only thing I controlled was giving you all the information you needed to make your own decision. And you chose me. Not because I manipulated you, because you wanted something more than the safe, small life you'd been living. Desmarais looked back at the phone, scrolling through more files. Financial records showing millions transferred into accounts with her biometric locks. Accounts only she could access. Legal documents granting her ownership of properties she'd never seen. Encrypted communications with lawyers arranging citizenship in 3 different countries under her name alone. These accounts, she said slowly, I'm the only one with access? Yes. The properties are in my name only? Yes. The legal protections, the citizenship arrangements, the exit strategies, they're all mine, not ours. June's smile was sad and small. I told you 3 months ago. You were always the one who got away. I was just making sure that when you decided to leave, you'd have everything you needed. Desmarais' throat tightened. And if I leave tonight? Then I'll miss you every day for the rest of my life, June said simply. But I'll know you're safe and free, and that will be enough. The rain began to soften, transitioning from assault to whisper. Desmarais looked at the man sitting next to her, the one who'd orchestrated his own empire's destruction, who'd spent 6 months planning how to let her go, who'd given her weapons he could have kept for himself. The message about the cage, she said quietly. "Show me the full thread." Jun took the phone, pulled up the conversation, and handed it back. She read the complete exchange, and her stomach dropped. Vera: "The wife is comfortable. Doesn't suspect you're behind the protection deal. Transfer confirmed." Jun: "Good. Keep her comfortable. 3 more months and the Singapore accounts will be untouchable." Vera: "You were right about her. She's so desperate to believe in happy endings, she can't see the cage you're building." Jun: "That's what makes her dangerous. She'll cooperate until she realizes it's a cage. Then she'll burn it down. Make sure Minho understands that. His wife isn't stupid. She's strategic. Don't underestimate her." Marie read it 3 times, watching the context shift and reform. Not about her, about Yuna, about Minho's wife, who was currently making deals with federal prosecutors while Jun worked behind the scenes to make sure those deals didn't destroy what little remained of his family's legitimate legacy. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Jun's hand found hers, his fingers threading through hers with careful precision. "Don't be. I would have suspected the same thing." The Singapore dawn broke soft and golden through the penthouse windows, turning the rain-slicked city into something that looked almost like forgiveness. Marie hadn't slept. She'd spent the last 3 hours reading through every file on Jun's phone. I'm piecing together the scope of what he'd actually been doing for the past 6 months. The syndicate hadn't just burned. It had been systematically dismantled, with Jun ensuring that everyone who'd worked for him, from the lowest courier to his own blood, had exit strategies that didn't end in body bags or prison cells. Minho would serve 3 years and come out with a legitimate business opportunity waiting. The accountants had jobs in legal firms in Seoul. The drivers had clean identities and seed money for new lives. Even the people who'd betrayed him had been given paths to redemption instead of execution. "You saved them all," she said, looking up from the phone to where Jun sat across from her, his long dark hair loose and disheveled, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "I tried," he corrected. Some people can't be saved from themselves, but I gave them all the choice I never had." Marie set down the phone and moved to sit beside him, her bare feet tucked under her, the black diamond ring on her finger catching the morning light. "The accounts you set up for me," she said slowly, "they're worth more than you told me." Jun's slight smile was answer enough. 300 million, she continued, in liquid assets. Another 200 in investments that mature over the next 5 years, properties in 7 countries, legal citizenship in places with no extradition. You didn't just give me an exit strategy, you gave me an empire. "I gave you freedom," Jun corrected gently. "What you do with it is your choice." Marie studied his face in the golden light, seeing the man who'd burned everything to create a world where she had power equal to his. "And the Singapore accounts Vera mentioned? The ones that will be untouchable in 3 more months?" Jun's expression didn't change, but she saw something flicker in his dark eyes. "Those are mine. What's left of the syndicate's legitimate holdings after I've finished cleaning them. Money that can't be traced back to anything illegal. Businesses that will generate income without requiring me to be a criminal. You're building a new life." "We're building a new life," he corrected. "If you stay, if you choose this, the accounts are separate because I needed you to know you don't need me financially. That if you're here, it's because you want to be, not because you're trapped." Marie felt something shift in her chest, in some final piece of armor cracking open to reveal the truth she'd been avoiding for 3 months. She wasn't here because she was manipulated. She was here because for the first time in her life, someone had given her the choice to be powerful instead of safe. "The psychological profile," she said quietly. "What else did it say about me?" Jun's hand came up to cup her face, his touch achingly gentle despite the calluses on his palms. "That you'd been playing small your whole life, taking jobs that were beneath your intelligence, dating men who were intimidated by your strength, living in a world that was safe and comfortable and slowly suffocating you." His thumb traced the line of her jaw, and she felt her pulse spike, despite the exhaustion weighing down her bones. It said you were waiting for someone to see you. Really see you. Well, not the professional mask or the competent assistant or the woman who made everyone else comfortable, but the person underneath who was brilliant and ruthless and capable of burning the world down if given the right match. And you decided to be that match, Desmarie whispered. Jun's smile was slow and devastating. I decided to be the gasoline. You were always the match. The morning light painted them both in gold, and Desmarie realized she'd stopped being angry somewhere in the last 3 hours. The fury had burned away, leaving something far more dangerous in its wake: understanding, and worse, partnership. I'm still furious you had me profiled, she said. I know. And that you kept secrets for 3 months. I know. And that you slipped that ring on my finger without asking. Jun's smile widened slightly. That one I'm not sorry about. Desmarie felt herself smile despite everything, and the expression felt foreign and right all at once. What happens in 3 months? She asked. When the accounts are untouchable? Jun's expression grew serious. We make a choice. Stay disappeared and build something quiet. Or use what we've built to become something new. Something that doesn't require hiding. Like what? Like legitimate power. Jun's eyes held hers, with an intensity that made her breath catch. Political influence, corporate leverage, the kind of control that comes from owning the systems instead of operating outside them. We have the resources, the intelligence, the ruthlessness. We could build an empire that makes the syndicate look like amateur hour. Desmarie's pulse quickened. That's ambitious. That's us, Jun corrected. Separately, we're dangerous. Together, we're unstoppable. He leaned closer, his forehead almost touching hers, his breath warm against her lips. So, what do you say, Desmarie? Do you want to keep playing house and pretending we're normal? Or do you want to build something that makes the world remember our names? The question hung between them like a challenge and a promise, and a threat all wrapped in gold-plated temptation. Desmarie should have said no. Should have recognized this for what it was, another beautiful manipulation, another way Jun was pulling her deeper into a world she'd supposedly escaped. But as she sat there in the Singapore dawn, wearing his ring, surrounded by evidence of the empire he'd built specifically for her, she realized something that made her chest tight and her pulse race. She didn't want to say no, she wanted to burn brighter. I have conditions, she said quietly. Jun's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. Name them. Full transparency. No more burner phones. No more secrets that require me to have plausible deniability. If we're partners, we're actual partners. Agreed. Equal access to all accounts, all information, all decisions. You don't make moves without consulting me first. Agreed. And if I ever find out you're playing me, if I ever discover this is just another long game where I'm the pawn instead of the queen, I take everything and disappear so completely you'll spend the rest of your life wondering if I was ever real. Jun's eyes darkened with something that looked dangerously close to desire. Agreed. Anything else? Desmarie leaned forward, closing the distance between them until her lips were a breath away from his. Teach me everything you know, she whispered. Every manipulation, every strategy, every way you've learned to make the world bend to your will. Because if we're building an empire, I want to know how to rule it without you. Jun's breath caught, and she saw the exact moment he realized she wasn't the woman he'd profiled 6 months ago. She was something far more dangerous. She was his equal. That, he said, his voice rough with emotion and something darker, is the most terrifying thing you've ever said to me. Good. Desmarie's smile was sharp and sweet and filled with promise. You should be terrified. Because I'm done being the assistant. Done being the woman who stands 3 feet from power. I want the chair. I want the empire. I want everything you promised me and more. Jun's hand slid into her natural curls, his fingers tangling in the soft coils as he pulled her closer. Then take it. The kiss was inevitable, necessary, A sealing of a bargain that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with mutual recognition of two predators who'd finally found their match. Desmarais tasted ambition on his tongue, felt hunger in the way his hands mapped the curve of her spine, sensed the shift in power as she pressed him back against the couch and took control of the moment the same way she was taking control of her life. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the sun had fully risen over Singapore. John looked at her with something that might have been awe or fear or desire all tangled together. "You're going to be magnificent." "We're going to be magnificent," Desmarais corrected, echoing his words from earlier. "And terrifying, and unstoppable." She stood, pulling him up with her, the black diamond ring catching light as she threaded her fingers through his. "So, where do we start?" June's smile was slow and dangerous and beautiful. "We start by making a phone call to someone who thinks they have leverage over us. And then we teach them what real power looks like." The Singapore skyline glittered below them, full of possibility and danger and the promise of everything they were about to become. Desmarais looked at the man standing next to her, no longer her boss, no longer her captor, but something far more dangerous and infinitely more valuable, her partner in beautiful destruction, and together, they were going to set the world on fire. "Okay. I need to know something right now. When did you realize Desmarais wasn't the victim in this story anymore? Was it the psychological profile? The conditions she set? The moment she took control of that kiss? Drop a comment because this just shifted from romance to something way more dangerous, and I'm here for it. If you're ready to see what kind of empire these two build together, hit that subscribe button. And tell me what city you're watching from, because we're about to take this global." The phone call June made wasn't to a rival or a former associate or anyone Desmarais expected. It was to his mother. She watched him dial, his long, dark hair still loose from sleep, the thorned vine tattoo on his neck visible as he tilted his head, waiting for the connection. The Singapore morning light painted him in gold and shadows, making him look less like a man and more like a beautiful weapon finally unsheathed. "Iama," he said, when the line connected, his voice carrying that surgical calm that Desmarais had learned meant he was at his most dangerous. The response came in rapid Korean, a woman's voice sharp with authority and what sounded like fury. Desmarais' Korean was limited to business phrases, but she caught enough to understand the tone. Disappointment, anger, betrayal. June's expression didn't change. "English, please. I have someone who needs to hear this." A pause. Then the voice switched languages, and Desmarais heard every word with crystal clarity. "You destroyed everything your father built, everything I protected for 30 years. For what? A woman?" June's eyes found Desmarais across the room, and something in his gaze made her pulse spike. "No, for freedom, but yes, she's part of it." "Put her on speaker," his mother demanded. "Let me hear the voice of the woman who convinced my son to burn his legacy." Jun hit the speaker button without hesitation, setting the phone on the glass coffee table between them. Desmarais moved closer, her bare feet silent on marble, her silk pajamas catching the light as she sat on the arm of the couch. Her natural curls framed her face in wild morning glory, her warm brown skin glowing, high cheekbones sharp with the kind of focus that came from years of navigating rooms full of powerful men who underestimated her. "Mrs. Shin," she said, her voice steady as stone. "I didn't convince your son to do anything. But he made his own choices. Choices that destroyed my family." The voice on the other end was ice wrapped in silk. "Choices that put my youngest son in prison. Choices that made us targets for every rival who ever wanted to see the Shin name buried. Choices that freed him," Desmarais corrected, and she felt June's attention sharpen on her like a blade. "From an empire he never wanted. From a legacy that required him to be a monster. From a life where he was a weapon instead of a person." The silence that followed was absolute. Then June's mother laughed. It was a sound like breaking glass, beautiful and dangerous and utterly unexpected. "So you do have teeth?" she said. "Good. I was worried my son had chosen someone soft." June's hand found Desmarie's, his fingers threading through hers with casual possession. "Why, she's the furthest thing from soft. Which is why I'm calling. And what do you want, June? My blessing? My forgiveness? My approval of your little rebellion?" "None of those things." June's voice dropped to that dangerous register Desmarie remembered from Chicago. "I want you to liquidate the Soul holdings, all of them. The shipping company, the real estate portfolio, the restaurant chain, every legitimate business the family still controls." Another pause. Longer this time, heavy with implications. "And give you the proceeds?" His mother's voice was sharp with suspicion. "No." June squeezed Desmarie's hand once, a signal she understood instinctively. "Give them to her." Desmarie's breath caught. She looked at June, searching his face for the angle, the manipulation, the game underneath the game. But all she saw was a man making a move so bold it bordered on insane. "You want me to hand over $500 million in assets to a woman I've never met," his mother said flatly. "A woman who helped you destroy everything we built. I want you to hand over assets that legally belong to you, not the syndicate, not the family, but you personally, to the woman who's going to rebuild what I tore down." June's eyes never left Desmarie's face. "Better, cleaner, legitimate, and more powerful than anything we ever accomplished through violence." "Why would I do that?" "Because you're tired," June said simply. "Tired of protecting an empire built on blood. Tired of watching your sons destroy themselves trying to live up to a legacy that was poison from the beginning. I'm tired of being the woman who chose power over everything else and woke up one day realizing power was all she had left." The silence stretched so long, Desmarie thought the connection had dropped. Then, "You're right, I am tired." June's mother's voice had changed, some of the steel melting away to reveal something raw underneath. "But that doesn't mean I trust you. Or her." "You don't have to trust us," Desmarie said, finding her voice again. "You just have to decide if you want your legacy to end with your sons in prison and your empire in ashes, or if you want a chance at redemption." Redemption. The word was bitter. And what would that look like? Desmarie looked at June, saw the slight nod of permission, and made a choice that would either save them or destroy everything. "It looks like me using your resources to build something legitimate. Corporate influence, political leverage, the kind of power that comes from owning systems instead of breaking them. And when we succeed, the Shin name gets attached to something that doesn't require you to wash blood off your hands every night." June's mother arrived in Singapore 36 hours later. Desmarie stood on the penthouse balcony, watching the sun set over the city, when she heard the elevator chime. She'd spent the last day and a half learning everything June could teach her about corporate warfare, political maneuvering, and the art of legitimate power. Her head was spinning with information about shell corporations and proxy voting and leveraged buyouts. Her hands were cramped from signing documents that transferred Jun's remaining assets into structures she controlled. Her mind was racing with possibilities that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. She heard footsteps behind her, turned, and came face to face with a woman who looked like she'd been carved from the same marble as the penthouse floors. Mrs. Shin was in her late 50s, with silver-streaked black hair pulled into a severe bun, sharp cheekbones that could cut glass, and eyes that assessed Desmarie with the precision of a jeweler examining a diamond for flaws. "So you're the one," she said in perfect English, her accent barely noticeable. Desmarie straightened her spine, meeting that calculating gaze without flinching. She changed into a tailored black dress that hugged her curves. Her natural curls pulled into a high bun that showcased the elegant line of her neck, her warm brown skin glowing in the golden hour light. The black diamond ring on her finger caught the sunset, throwing tiny rainbows across the marble. "I'm Desmarie," she said simply. "I know who you are." Mrs. Shin moved past her into the penthouse, her presence filling the space with the kind of authority that came from decades of controlling rooms full of dangerous men. "I know everything about you. Your education. Your employment history. Your family. Your weaknesses. She turned back to face Desmarais, her expression unreadable. What I don't know is why my son thinks you're worth $500 million. June appeared from the office, his long dark hair pulled back now, and wearing a black suit that made him look every inch the kingpin he used to be. Because she's the only person I've ever met who's more ruthless than you. His mother's eyebrow arched. Careful, June. Flattery doesn't work on me anymore. It's not flattery. June moved to stand beside Desmarais, his hand finding the small of her back in a gesture that was part possession, part support. It's fact. Show her. Desmarais reached for the tablet on the side table, pulling up the presentation she'd spent the last 36 hours building. The Sol holdings are worth approximately $500 million in current market value, but they're underperforming, badly. The shipping company is losing contracts to more efficient competitors. The real estate portfolio is tied up in buildings that are slowly losing value, and the restaurant chain is profitable but stagnant. She swiped to the next screen, showing projections that made Mrs. Shin's eyes narrow with interest despite herself. I can triple that value in 18 months. The shipping company gets restructured and rebranded as a green logistics firm, positioning for the sustainability contracts that are about to explode in Asia-Pacific. The real estate gets converted into mixed-use developments targeting the growing tech sector. The restaurants become a franchise model that leverages Korea's cultural influence in the region. Mrs. Shin took the tablet, scrolling through the detailed breakdowns, the market analysis, the financial projections that Desmarais had built from the ground up. You did this in a day and a half? I did this in 4 years, Desmarais corrected. While standing 3 feet from your son's desk, watching him move money and power like chess pieces. I learned, I adapted, and now I'm ready to play my own game. Mrs. Shin looked from the tablet to Desmarais' face, something shifting in her expression. You remind me of myself, 30 years ago, before I married into this family and learned that intelligence is only valuable if you're willing to be ruthless with it. Then you understand why I need this, Desmarais said quietly. Not for the money, not for Jun, but because I've spent my entire life being underestimated by people who couldn't see past my skin or my gender or their own assumptions, and I'm done playing small. The sunset painted them all in gold and shadow, 3 people who'd each learned in different ways that power was the only currency that mattered. Mrs. Shin set down the tablet and pulled a leather folder from her bag. Inside were documents that Desmarais recognized from her years managing June's paperwork. Transfer agreements, ownership certificates, keys to an empire. Sign these, Mrs. Shin said, laying them on the glass table. And the Sol holdings are yours. No strings, no conditions, no expectation that you'll use them to rebuild my family's reputation. Desmarais picked up the pen, her hand steady despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. And if I fail? Then you fail spectacularly, and at least I'll have the satisfaction of watching someone try. Mrs. Shin's smile was sharp. But something tells me failure isn't in your vocabulary. Desmarais signed each document with the same precision Jun had taught her, and her signature transforming her from assistant to architect with each stroke of the pen. When she finished, Mrs. Shin gathered the papers, her expression still unreadable. One more thing. She reached into her bag and pulled out a second black velvet box, setting it on the table next to Jun's. Inside was a ring, not diamonds this time. A single black pearl set in platinum, surrounded by a constellation of smaller stones that looked like stars frozen in metal. That ring belonged to Jun's grandmother, Mrs. Shin said quietly. She built the first legitimate Shin business with money she saved from working in factories. She taught me that power without legacy is just destruction with better lighting. She looked at Desmarais with something that might have been respect. Jun gave you a promise. I'm giving you a legacy. I don't waste either. 6 months later, Desmarais stood in a boardroom in Seoul, facing down 12 men who'd spent the last hour trying to intimidate her into accepting their lowball acquisition offer. They'd made every mistake possible, talked over her, questioned her credentials, made subtle comments about her age and her gender and the interesting choice to put someone so inexperienced in charge of such valuable assets. What they didn't know was that Jun was listening to every word through the discreet earpiece she wore, feeding her information about each man's weaknesses, their financial vulnerabilities, their secrets. What they really didn't know was that she didn't need his help anymore. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice cutting through their posturing with surgical precision. Her natural curls were styled in a professional updo, her warm brown skin glowing against the emerald green power suit she'd chosen specifically because it commanded attention. Both rings, Jun's black diamonds and his grandmother's black pearl, caught the fluorescent lighting. "I appreciate your offer. It's been illuminating." The lead negotiator smiled, clearly thinking he'd won. "So you'll accept our terms?" "No." Desmarie's smile was sharper than his. "I'll be accepting the offer from your primary competitor, the one that's 40% higher and doesn't require me to listen to another hour of thinly veiled condescension." She stood, gathering her materials with practiced efficiency. "But thank you for the master class in how not to negotiate with someone who controls assets you desperately need. It'll make an excellent case study when I teach this at business schools." The room erupted in protests and angry demands for reconsideration. Desmarie walked out without looking back. Jun was waiting in the car outside, his long, dark hair pulled into a low ponytail, wearing a charcoal suit that made him look like sex and danger in equal measure. The thorned vine tattoo on his neck was visible above his collar, a reminder of everything he used to be. "How did it feel?" he asked as she slid into the leather seat beside him. "Like victory." Desmarie's smile was genuine and fierce. "Like power, like everything I've been working toward." Jun's hand found hers, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "The Soul holdings are now worth 800 million, triple what my mother gave you, and in half the time you projected." "I'm aware." Desmarie leaned back against the seat, exhaustion and exhilaration warring in her chest. "The tech conversion on the real estate is ahead of schedule. The shipping rebrand is getting more attention than projected. And the restaurant franchise just signed deals in 5 new countries." "You're magnificent," Jun murmured, and there was something in his voice that made her pulse spike. "We're magnificent," she corrected, turning to face him. "None of this works without you feeding me intelligence, without your contacts, without the foundation you built." Jun's expression grew serious. "It works because you're brilliant. I'm just the support system." "You're my partner," Desmarie said firmly, "and don't ever forget it." The car pulled up to the private airfield where their jet waited, and they had meetings in Singapore tomorrow, then Hong Kong, then a political fundraiser in Washington that would give them access to power structures they'd only dreamed about 6 months ago. Somewhere in the process of building an empire, they'd stopped running from their past and started creating their future. As they boarded the plane, Desmarie caught sight of their reflection in the tinted glass. A black woman in an emerald suit and a Korean man in charcoal gray, both wearing rings that symbolized promises and legacies and power earned through intelligence instead of violence. They looked like exactly what they were. 2 people who'd burned everything to the ground and built something better from the ashes. Jun's hand slid to the small of her back as they climbed the stairs. What are you thinking?" "That 6 months ago I was standing in a penthouse in Chicago, wearing a sapphire dress, about to go on a date with a man who didn't exist." Desmarie looked at him, seeing the exhaustion and satisfaction and love written in every line of his face. "And now I'm standing here with an empire I built, wearing rings that mean something, with a partner who sees me as an equal." "And?" Jun's smile was slight. "And I think I finally understand what you meant when you said we could build something neither of us could create alone." The Singapore penthouse had changed in 6 months. Gone were the sparse, masculine furnishings Jun had chosen. Now the space was theirs. Art Desmarie had selected, furniture they'd chosen together. A home office that had 2 desks facing each other because they worked better side by side than apart. Desmarais stood on the balcony in the early morning light, wearing one of June's shirts and nothing else, her natural curls loose and wild, watching the city wake up below. She heard him before she felt him, his footsteps soft on marble, then his arms sliding around her waist from behind, pulling her back against his chest. "You're up early," he murmured against her neck, his breath warm on her skin. "Couldn't sleep." She leaned into him, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against her spine. "Too many thoughts." About? About how we went from Chicago to here? About what comes next? About whether we can actually pull off what we're planning. What they were planning was audacious, bordering on insane. In a legitimate business empire spanning 3 continents. Political influence in 5 countries. The kind of power that made the Shin Syndicate look like amateur hour. And they were going to do it without violence, without threats, with nothing but intelligence and ruthlessness, and the kind of partnership that most people spent lifetimes searching for. Jun turned her in his arms, his dark eyes serious in the golden light. "We can pull it off. Because we're not just smart or ruthless or strategic. We're all 3. Together." His hand came up to cup her face, thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone with a gentleness that still surprised her. "And because you're not the woman I profiled anymore. You've become something I never anticipated." "What's that?" "My equal in every way that matters. My partner in building instead of destroying. The person who makes me want to be better than everything I was raised to be." Desmarais felt tears burning behind her eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. "That's the most romantic thing you've ever said to me." June's smile was slow and devastating. "I have my moments." He kissed her then, soft and deep and filled with promise, and Desmarais felt something settle in her chest. Some final piece of uncertainty dissolving into acceptance. This was real. This partnership. This empire they were building. This future they were creating from the ashes of everything they'd burned. When they finally broke apart, the sun had fully risen over Singapore. "So what's the first move today?" Desmarais asked. June's smile turned sharp and dangerous and beautiful. "We start by making a few calls to people who think they have power. And then we show them what real power looks like when it's built by 2 people who refuse to play by anyone else's rules." Desmarais' answering smile was equally sharp. "I love it when you talk strategy." "I know." Jun pulled her back toward the bedroom, his intentions clear in the way his hands mapped her curves in the heat of his gaze. "But first, I think we should celebrate 6 months of you terrifying every business leader in Asia." "And how do you propose we celebrate?" June's laugh was low and rough and filled with promise. "I have a few ideas." They disappeared into the penthouse, leaving the Singapore morning to unfold without them, 2 architects of their own destiny finally understanding that the most dangerous thing they'd ever done wasn't burning an empire. It was building one together. Because separately, they were brilliant and ruthless and strategic. But together, they were unstoppable, and the world was about to find out exactly what that meant. So here's what I need to know. When did you realize this wasn't just a romance anymore, but an origin story for something way more powerful? Was it the boardroom takedown? The moment his mother handed over the empire? The realization that Desmarais became the architect instead of the assistant? Drop your answer in the comments, because this journey from Chicago to Singapore just proved that sometimes the best revenge is building something better than what you burned down. If you want to see where Jun and Desmarais take their empire next, hit that subscribe button because their story is far from over. And tell me what city you're watching from. I want to know how far this empire has reached tonight.